Do we find the same fish in the ocean that we see in the Great Lakes? Why not? They're both the same habitat. They're both water. One's salty, one's not, right? Well, trees and forests are the same kind of situation there. We have two major groups of trees. We have like these maples up here that are starting to change color slightly. Beech and maple forest that we're going to first walk into. That's a hardwood forest. That provides certain kinds of habitat for certain kinds of animals. There's another kind of tree that we have, which are the needle trees, which are pines, hemlocks, firs, spruces, cedars. All of those are evergreens. And if you have a forest full of pines, you've got different habitat than a forest full of maple trees. But they're both forests, so you'd think that you'd see the same things, but you won't. And so that's what I try to help landowners with, is making decisions on how to attract certain kinds of wildlife based on the forest types that they have. And we'll talk about those as we go through. I'll give you a little lesson on how to identify trees really easily. Field guides help, but you can do it without field guides too. So, we're going to move along. All I ask is that you stay behind me a little bit so that when I stop, I don't have to go, hey, come on back. Because I'll stop and figure out what you're talking about certain things. And if you get disinterested, or if I'm talking too high or too low level, let me know, and I'll crank it up or I'll crank it down, and we'll have a good time. All right. Mount Pleasant.
No, over there.
Brooklyn, Michigan.
Brooklyn, Michigan. Okay. Mount Pleasant.
Waco, Texas.
Waco, Texas. Welcome. Where are you guys? Where? Howell? Howell, Michigan?
No. Here. I'm just from Michigan.
So what
Anywhere
town?
specifically?
What town?
Like Nover?
There you go. Michigan, Fort Hope.
Nover? Michigan?
Fort Hope.
Fort Hope. And what'd you say?
Nover? In the town?
Aubrey.
That's stuff.
Aubrey.
I've never heard of Snover before. Is that by Pigeon?
Near there.
Badass?
Close enough.
There you go. Close
Got
to
it.
that.
I know the area, but our goal was just to get to Sleeper State Park.
Okay, there you go.
Back in high school. So we are standing in a forest of hardwood trees. These are beech and maple primarily. Anybody who is familiar with the country Canada knows that there's a maple leaf on the flag. Also the Toronto Maple Leafs. I was telling young ladies who were walking through, they asked what the orange tape was on some of those trees. That's to show our line where we walk with snowshoes in the late winter, early spring. We tap our trees and have maple syrup day here. And so that's to show us that we can go that way and not step on logs or branches that are buried with snow. So that's our route. So there's a lot of uses for our forest here. This used to be an old-growth pine forest. And the Selling Hansen company that owned this property, they were a logging company in the area, were harvesting here in 1893. And they harvested all the pine that was here all the way down to an area when we get down there, which will be our old-growth forest. There's 49 acres that remain. But at that time, in 1893, there was an economic recession called the Panic of 93, and that was nationwide. And there was lots of wood that was in the sawmills, and nobody was building houses, and they said, why are we cutting more trees? Nobody's buying it, so let's stop. And they stopped harvesting right here. At the time, they left 86 acres of old-growth pine. Well, 3 years later, that recession lifted in 1896, and they resumed harvesting. And as a company should do, they looked for the biggest bang for their buck, and they said, okay, we've got 86 acres, but we also just purchased northwest of here 8,000 acres. Do we set up our railroad grade tracks to go in and just harvest that measly little 86 acres, or do we start on the 8,000 acres? And they said, let's do the math. So they left that group of pine, the grove of white pine and red pine, and it's there by an accident. Otherwise, if there was no recession, that would have been wiped out too. We would be talking about something else here, or maybe not even having this be a state park. But the curious thing is that hardwood trees came up afterwards. If pines were here, you would think that that would have been good habitat for pines to continue to grow, but they didn't. And once we get into the old growth, I'll explain why. But maybe think about yourself why you would think that pines didn't grow here. Something changed in terms of the natural process that allowed hardwoods to come in instead of pines. Pines were here, they should be here, but they're not now. From a habitat standpoint, this is a wonderful place to see wildlife, although we don't want to see this animal up close. What do we know what this is?
Skunk.
Skunk, right. There are two, and this is a member of the weasel family. Any animal in the weasel family has a musk gland, so they have the potential to stink, but not necessarily spraying you. There's only two members of the weasel family that can spray their sting. The skunk is one, and the other one is... What do you think?
No, I don't know.
Oh, you'll know.
No.
I know you'll know.
A Wolverine.
Look down
That's cute. I don't quite know about
on your shirt.
Oh, the Wolverine?
The Wolverine.
No kidding.
Yeah, Wolverine. Which is very curious because Wolverines are the nastiest and most vicious of all the weasels. They're massive and they have clamped down jaws. They'll take down wolves. They are just ferocious. So, from a behavioral standpoint, why would they want to spray their sting? Well,
Because they're in danger.
nope.
Mark the territory.
Mark their territory is one thing. They'll also spray that musk on the deer that
was
they
that?
killed. And they don't mind eating something stinky, but something else does. And so they go, well, this is my food. Don't eat it. I'll come back and eat it because I'm a Wolverine. I don't really care. Also, when they are young, they can be taken. When they're small, I mean, they could probably be attacked by a skunk and if they're little kits and be disposed of. So it's probably a defense mechanism when they're younger. I don't know that for a fact, but I would think that logically that makes sense. So but you will see, I've not seen them in here, but I've smelled the skunk along this trail before. So that is one animal that you'll find in the woodlands as well as in your backyard in the trash. Or pulling grubs out of your front lawn.
Oh.
Pass that around if you want. Really quickly. All right, we'll keep going. How you doing? Pass number 3. Zoom right past it. No stopping. Oh, thank you.
Hey.
Did you get a chance to see it? Go ahead. Very soft. You know, you wouldn't think that a skunk is that soft. You see them dead on the side of the road, all bloated up in the summertime, and you're like, I wouldn't touch that. But this, once they're clean and smells like our basement instead of a skunk. Actually, skunks make very good pets. They're very easily domesticatable, however you want to call it. You can tame them. You can be housebroken. You put a leash on them. You can walk around, and you remove that gland, and they're good pets.
No one bothers
So,
you.
one thing, as we passed by the beech trees down there, we pulled out these. Here, hold on one of these. Okay. Hold on one of these. They're not pokey. One of these. Feel how soft. It's pokey, but not really that pokey. It's not like it hurts, but it's prickly. And those are beech seeds. If you break one of those open, on the inside you'll see 2 triangular seeds, and then if you take open the outer shell of that, you'll have the little seed. These probably won't have them because these are fell down prematurely. They start to ripen at the end of August, early September. You get kind of a golden brown. You can eat them. They don't taste good. They don't taste bad. They just taste like nothing really. But they are a way that you can help feed yourself. If you are ever lost in the woods, you dig through the snow, find a couple, and they should be fine. Look for little black holes on them. That's where the weevil came out. So, eating one now, you always have to look for that little, you don't know if there's going to be a little worm in it or not. And it's just protein, so it really doesn't matter. But what I tell the kids, when they come here in spring and fall for tours, I pull those out. And what I found after doing this for so many years, that a lot of the kids know more than what we do as adults. Because they're learning this stuff in school and it's fresh. We forget as we go out that maples have a leaf like this and they have opposite branching. We forget about all that stuff but the kids know because they're learning about this, and this is something they go through. So I find to bring the parents back into my tours with the kids because they're there. And I think they should be supportive of their kids being here. I'll tell the kids that I said this is a porcupine egg, and I'll pull out that little seed and I'll say, look, it's a porcupine egg. And the kids are like, no. But it's the parents who go, I didn't know porcupines laid eggs. Really? And I get the. Now I got the parents because they're like, is this guy going to lie to me the whole trip? And then my kids are going to ask, what was that thing he pulled out? And the parents go, well, it was not a porcupine, it was a beech nut seed. You know, and then now I got the parents' attention. I always have the kids' attention because I'm on. So that works. So then all those kids are like, you're weird. I'm like, yeah. But you can't eat these. It's best to put some garlic salt and some butter in a pan, roast them a little bit. They're pretty good. Don't eat them now. I had a college group that I said you could eat those, and right off the bat, this one guy pulls one out and starts chewing on it. Well, you got to take that other coating off, and he didn't. And he's like, these are terrible. I'm like, what I was going to tell you is that these are not ripe, and you have to take the coating off. He's like, oh, yeah.
So what is a good time to eat it? What time of year?
Early September, mid-September. A lot of the ones that come down now, blue jays have this ability to listen for the little chewing of the larvae in the inside. And usually the ones we see on the ground now are nipped off and dropped by blue jays. So most of the ones that you're probably holding, at least one side might have a small little larvae in it. I mean, tiny enough that it's like a hangnail. I mean, it's very small. What else I'd like to talk about here is this tree, this leaning dead tree called a snag. A tree that's dead but still standing is called a snag. What's it called when it falls to the ground?
Firewood?
Firewood's good. The more technical term, it's called a log. Log. Okay. So, didn't get the laugh I expected. Yeah. I'm all confused now. What made the holes in this tree?
Woodpecker.
Woodpeckers. Do we know what kind? What's that?
Hungry one.
Hungry ones. Excellent. Yeah, that's true. But more specifically, the rectangular holes, the larger ones up on top, are made by a pileated or a pileated woodpecker. About 14 inches tall. Looks like a pterodactyl when it flies. It's really, really cool. Well, it's looking for food. And when wildlife look for a place to live, they look for three different things. They look for food and water. I put those together. They look for shelter, a place to raise their families, or get out of the elements, or get away from predators. And then the third thing is space. And the way I explain space to folks is that if we were all chipmunks and there was a hawk flying through here trying to eat us, and we all wanted to hide under this branch down here, some of us would be able to get under there and be secure. Some of us, our rear ends would be sticking out, and we would become lunch. And so there's not enough space for all of us little chipmunks to hide into there. Some might have to hide here, or there, or in the tree, or on the other side of the trail. So space is how we can all survive without starving or all getting eaten. And this tree also provides shelter for a woodpecker besides the food, because the food is what, like you said, it's hungry. It's looking for the insects that are helping to decompose that tree. But there's a hole below that little nub on the left that is a cavity itself. A woodpecker came here over 10 years ago, because it's been there since that long, excavated that hole, spit out the wood chips, made a nice cavity inside there, went inside, laid its eggs, raised its young, and then woodpeckers very rarely go back and use that same nest cavity year after year. They use it 1 year, and then they don't return to it. So they're constantly making homes. And one of the birds that it makes a nest for is this bird. This is an owl. This is called a saw-whet owl. And the saw-whet owl is our smallest owl in Michigan. And it will go into an old woodpecker hole. This bird does not have the ability to make its own nest. Its beak is too small. Its talons are used for picking up third graders. So it won't really just go. You're going into third grade? Be careful. This is the all-important year
I just came out of it.
So you survived the dreaded saw-wet owl taking you away. You survived too. Good. Just be careful.
I'm going in second.
You're fine then. You got a year of freedom, and then watch out for the dreaded saw-wet owl that attacks third graders.
I think I know which hole I was in.
Which hole? Yep, that hole. So it would live inside there, raise its young, because woodpeckers have that ability to make nest cavities for other birds. Chickadees that we all love, and the nuthatches can't make their own nests either. They can. They go into a bird box kind of thing and make their own nesting material, but they don't make their own cavity. They can't. So woodpeckers are a very important element to bringing all of the wildlife together in a forest. I was doing a program 7 years ago with a group and pointed up there, and as I pointed, I'm not kidding you, a chipmunk popped its head out, and the kids were like, "How'd you do that?" I've never done it since, but it shows that that chipmunk had taken up residence in that tree. So woodpeckers are very beneficial, even if they peck on your house. If they peck in your house, they're telling you you've got insect problems in your house. It's a good thing. Then you call Orkin and get the insects out of there. Woodpeckers will help you maintain your home if you let them.
That was kind of get annoying because it would be like...
It does get annoying. It does get annoying. But, I'm just going to stop briefly at the Monarch because it's one of our, it used to be our most famous tree. It still is. People come and ask every day that I work here, where's that big tree that you can drive through? We never had a tree you could drive through. People always ask, where's that tree? And I'm like, well, it happens all the time. It just happened to happen on your watch. That's all. Everybody's like, sorry, no, it's going to happen. That's why we ask you don't stand on them, because they may fall. But we always get asked the question, where's the tree you can drive through? We didn't have a tree that you can drive through. That's in California. But our white pines at Hartwick Pines are some of the largest in Michigan, if not the largest in the northern lower peninsula, not individually. Individually, I'll have folks come in and say, I've got this tree, I live by the Asaba River, and the tree is this big. It's bigger than any tree you've got here. How old do you think? It's got to be one of those old growth trees. No, that tree was growing out in the open. So it didn't have any competition from water, nutrients, or sunlight. And it grew massive. I said, does it have huge branches? They're like, yeah, the branches are huge. The branches on the side of the tree are as big as that tree is around. That's because it was basking in that sunlight and growing. That tree's probably only like 110 years old because it didn't have to share itself with any other tall trees. These trees grew next to each other and they were shaded out, and they could only get so much sunlight in a day in 24-hour period. So they just grew slowly, straight and tall. These trees that we're going to be going into once we get into the heart of the old growth are between 360 and 410 years old. And the reason those numbers are skewed because when I first started working here, they said these trees are between 350 and 400 years old. And I've been doing this for 10 years, so they got to be 10 years old. Right? They got to be 360 and 410, and so that's what we say they are now. We are losing many of them through windstorms, snowstorms, lightning strikes. We lose about a dozen trees a year, but we have 49 acres, and they're at the end of their lifespan, their life cycle. So we know a life cycle of, let's say, a dandelion. You got a seed, and you go. That seed goes into your lawn, makes a new plant, then the flower comes up, turns yellow, then it turns back into a seed, and that's the life cycle of a dandelion. Trees are the same way. They start out as a little seed, they start to grow tall, and then they get mature enough that they can produce their own seed. They drop seeds, new trees are formed. It's just the life cycle of a white pine is 500 years, and the life of a dandelion is about 2 weeks. So life cycles, we all go through life cycles. Butterflies do the same thing. Caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly, cocoon if it's a moth. So we're going to move closer and we're going to sit on a log in the old growth forest. Log. That's a snag that fell down. I knew you knew that. Branches. They're not a full one. No, that's kind of scary actually. These trees are big. And you don't know where, and plus the domino effect of how close they are to each other, you don't know where those trees are going to land. It's a good point. when I was at Michigan State, one of the first things I learned about forestry is that if you start to hear a in the forest, don't go, what? Because by the time you do that, that limb or that tree is on you. You hear wherever you hear it from, run in the opposite direction. Run until you feel that thump on the ground, because don't take the time to go, wow. That's just not beneficial to you to do that.
But what if it's on both sides?
Then hide under your dad.
There you go.
Then you still get hurt.
Yeah, but not as bad as your dad will get hurt.
That's right.
So that's a good thing. Yeah. In fact, 2 weeks ago, doing an old growth tour, and the family kind of went ahead, and they were walking up towards the chapel, and we heard, and the whole group probably thought that I was just this schmuck by going, Jug, and I'm running, and they're like, what? I said, come on. And we all walked around, and we stopped and looked, and it was far enough away, but I still wanted to have everybody be safe. But the family, the dad was sitting there, and he was right by the tree, and he hears, and I looked and I saw what was happening. It was a dead branch that was just coming down. It actually got caught up in the tree, so it didn't come down, but you don't know if that's the case. So he's like this. Mom is over there, and his kids are here, and the kids are like, what is that, Dad? And he's like, I don't know, let's look. and I'm like, run! And he's like, what? I'm like, never mind. Past the point of no return. The limb didn't come down, but I would have thought, being, fight or flee, I would have taken the kids and thrown them and said, I'll take it, Luckily, nothing happened. So always run if you hear that branch breaking. We are sitting amongst the heart of our old-growth forest, large white pine trees like this. This is what the lumberjacks looked for when they wanted to cut down trees. Michigan, of course, had many thousands of acres of pure white pine stands, and there was more money made during the white pine logging era, which is considered to be from 1840 to 1910. More money made during that period than the entire California gold rush. So the trees that we shipped to help rebuild Chicago after the Great Chicago Fire, the expansion of the United States westward, all the trains took the logs and boards and took it out west and helped to build Nebraska and South Dakota, North Dakota. Look at the maps in South Dakota and North Dakota, and you see a lot of the same town names that we have. So Kalamazoo is out there. All these other areas that they moved from Michigan all the way westward, looking at you, all the way westward, and said, hey, well, we're from Kalamazoo in Michigan, we'll just do Kalamazoo in South Dakota. So, same name. For an old-growth forest to be considered an old-growth forest, several characteristics need to be evident. One is the thing that you guys are sitting on, logs. Large woody debris is a constant reminder that these trees have a lifespan, and windstorms will make them weak and they will fall over. Lightning strikes, snow, heavy snow will drop off branches, and we leave the wood down on the ground. We don't remove it. The only thing we do remove are things that block our path. So that's why you see some cut logs. But yes.
What's all that whistling?
I think that is an eastern wood peewee. But I'll have to hear it again. I think that's what it is. So, large woody debris. You also have large diameter trees, and they're evenly spaced. They're not all clumped together. We can see quite a distance until we get to some regenerating vegetation. To the right of that, over here, you can see way deep. Same thing with behind us, you can see for a long distance. There's another thing there that we notice is a lack of regeneration. Yes, we've got some here, we've got some there, we've got some in a somewhat lit area back there. And those areas are where trees fell down and sunlight is allowed to come down and continue regenerating species that come up after that disturbance. So those are called canopy gaps, and that's another characteristic of an old-growth forest. Pit and mound topography is another thing. And if we look back here on this little bump on the ground, I'm standing on a mound, and over here is a little pit. And this used to be the root ball of a large pine tree. And when the wind comes through and catches the top of that crown of that tree and knocks it over, the root stays up like this. And that root system stays up. Where the roots were, there's now a pit. And that starts to get filled with debris. And eventually, that is going to look like that in a couple hundred years. It's going to be decomposed, covered with vegetation, leaf litter. That pit's going to fill in too, but you'll still have that pit and mound topography. And that's natural process in an old-growth forest. These trees are at the last century of their life. Most of the windstorms, after I go through and take a look at where? No, that's a red squirrel. And he's not happy because we are in his home. No, it's a red squirrel.
Let him finish.
No, she's okay. She's okay. I like the ad-libbing. It keeps me on my toes. I was at a wedding last night, so I'm a little fuzzy in the head, but what else? So, okay, so you go to Paris, France. No, that's not the story I was telling you. What was that? I forgot, Haley.
The mounds and
It's okay, sweetie. You're fine. The mounds, yes,
The mounds.
yes. All of those characteristics make it over the forest. Oh, storm damage. I go through and look at these trees, and a lot of them are hollow. And I get a lot of loggers that come throughout the past several years and during the summer, and they're like, oh, if I just had a chainsaw, man, I could build half a full shed with some of these trees. No, because you got to look at the center, and there is no center to a lot of these trees. They're starting to decay. They're past their economic prime. There's still a habitat value, but there's no wood. There's not a lot of wood value. We had a windstorm 2 Octobers ago in 2010, and as I looked at all the trees that got snapped or blown completely over, I only found 2 that actually had a solid core. All the rest were rotten. So there's not a lot of wood value left in these trees, and they would have been cut by now anyway. I don't know if the staff has
what
left.
causes those knots on the tree?
That is a burl, and that is just an abnormal, the hormonal growth, the disease itself, or the fungus itself, creates more wood to grow in one area than elsewhere. You know, as we grow cells all throughout our body to get bigger all over, not just one area. Our one arm doesn't grow long, and the other one stays short. Well, in this case, wood grows just there. And the scientists are doing research to find out what that chemical is, because if they can figure out what that chemical is, they can use it to help regenerate skin for skin grafts for burn patients, which makes a lot of sense. You know, if that wood grows really quickly right there, then we can probably use it to try to grow skin back. Oh, here it is. Side pocket. Anybody know what this is?
Ferret.
It's not a ferret. Any ferret that you guys see, somebody's got one as a pet, those are European. The only native ferret we have in North America is the black-footed ferret that's found out west. Not an otter, but it's in the weasel family, so it's related to the otter.
It's a mink.
People say mink all the time, but this animal lives in a forest. Mink live near water, so this is a relative, very similar looking to a mink.
Schmink.
A schmink. No, I like that. Schmink.
You'll use that.
I will. That's my second favorite answer. My favorite answer was a parakeet. The kid said that. A parakeet. I'm like, I don't know what a parakeet is, but I'm going to use that. This is a pine marten.
Pine marten, that's what
An
it
American pine marten. And pine martens have a little beige color on their neck. I like to try to stretch its head out so you can see what it actually looks like. It's cute. It is adorable. Look online for pine martens and you'll fall in love with this animal. It is the cutest little thing. It's got a little nose that kind of goes up and down when it sniffs things. And it's got whiskers. The problem is that this has also very sharp, pointy, nasty teeth. And it will take your finger off. So don't pet the pine martens if you see one. If you want to see one, your best bet to see one is to go up into the UP. There's enough animals, there's enough population of those there that there's a trapping season for the pine marten up there. We're starting to see tracks of this animal once again. This animal used to be wherever we did have old growth forests in Michigan. Problem is, we cut down all the trees, and that changes the habitat from a forest ecosystem to a field or grassland. And this animal doesn't wake up, it doesn't adapt that quickly. It doesn't wake up one day and go, well, I guess I'll live in a field now. Where's it going to find a home? Where's it going to find a food source? So it likes forests, old forests, more specifically. And we got rid of those during the white pine logging era, which means we got rid of this, as well as this animal's very soft, which you'll find when I pass it around, and it's very highly prized fur. So, but they're small, so you have to get a bunch of them to make a coat or something like that. So this animal became extirpated from Michigan. What's it called when an animal totally is gone from the world, never to be seen again?
Instinct.
Extinct, right. So an animal that's extinct, like dinosaurs for the most part, kids will always challenge me on that. No, the alligators are still a dinosaur. I always get that. For the most part, like T-Rexes, they are dead and they're not coming back. Even unless it's a movie or in a museum. This animal didn't go through extinction, it went through extirpation. We had it here in Michigan. It got removed from its original range, which was in Michigan, but still found in Wisconsin, Minnesota, the Canadian provinces. So this animal was still alive. It didn't die totally. Well, scientists said, hey, before this animal does become extinct, let's raise it in captivity, reintroduce it back once we have trees in Michigan, in which we did because the Sea Boys started planting and replanting. And now that we've got remnants of old-growth forests and very mature secondary growth forests, we're starting to have this animal come back. We do see tracks of this animal in the wintertime. It's hard to see because, for one, it's brown. Secondly, it lives in the tops of the trees, and I've not seen one yet. I can't wait for the day that I do. I'll be so excited. But for the past 10 years, I've had to say I've never seen one. I'm still waiting. But I've only seen 2 bear working here as well, and we have bear here every year. You just have to be in the right place at the right time. But don't worry, because bear do not live in the old-growth forest for several reasons. One, there's no food down here for them to eat. There's no berries. That's mostly what they eat. I mean, yeah, they're omnivores, but they can't catch a rabbit. They're way too slow to catch a rabbit. Rabbits wouldn't live down here because there's not a lot of cover for rabbits to hide. One of the reasons bear are not here is all of us who make noise, and I'll scare them away, and dogs. And they can smell. Dogs can smell, and if there was a bear that was around here, I'm sure each one of those dogs would go, I smell it, before we do. And the bear is the same way. The bear will be, there's something with fur and 4 legs and a tail around here, and I'll stay away from that, because black bear at least, are fairly timid. So, yes.
What about if there was a snowshoe hare?
Yes, but by that time, the bears are sleeping. It's wintertime. Oh, well, you can see the snowshoe, I'm sorry, you're right. Snowshoe hare in the summertime, you'd find them too, but they are more in grassy areas where there's lots of places for them to be camouflaged and hide.
They change colors. In the summer they change brown, and in the winter they change white.
They do. Good.
Is there any more Wolverines in this?
No. Spartans beat them all up. Sorry, couldn't help myself.
There you go, John.
Yay!
You wait for that all the
Yeah, I
time.
know. I just gotta say it. No, there's a debate actually if Wolverines were ever in Michigan, and the reason it's in the same article that I read. So the author said, "This is the research I did. Here's the reasons why we do or do not have or never had one." First of all, it's not known if we were called a Wolverine state because we had Wolverines here. That's where everybody thinks, well, we're Wolverine state. We had to have Wolverines. Not necessarily. The Native American tribes that are indigenous to Michigan, all those 5 major tribes had no lore or stories about the Wolverine. They talked about the badger, they talked about the deer, the bear, the moose, the beaver, all those animals. None of them have a story about the Wolverine, which lends you to believe that, well, why didn't they have a story about something? Because they were all about the natural resources. So, how did we get the name the Wolverine state? Well, most accepted theory is that the people from Ohio gave us that name. And it's true, because there was something called the Toledo War, and which I like to think that Michigan won that war, even though the only thing that died in that war was a pig, and it lasted like 36 hours or something. So it's kind of like the war, but it's just a battle, I guess, that they have, and they were fighting over this little strip of land. We succeeded that land in the the Ohioans got Toledo, and we got the UP. So we won. I mean, you know, you can have Toledo. I'll take, even though Tony Pacos is great, but let's just take the UP instead, and we won. So they thought that we fought like Wolverines, because down there in southwest Michigan down there, and just even the whole boundary, very good soil. You have a lot of agriculture. There's smelly farmers that are tough and mean and dirty, and they fight tooth and nail. And so the Ohioans said, God, they fight like Wolverines. They smell, and so that's one reason. The other theory is that because of the fur trading along the coastline, they had all the furs would be out like on Lake Huron, and they'd be hanging. Well, the Wolverine, as I said, has a musk gland and it smells. So people would say, where are you going to get your furs? Well, I'm going over to that Wolverine territory over there. And then we became a state, and then they'd say we were going over to the Wolverine state. That's a theory. I don't know if that's true or not. So we don't know. All right. We're going to move on still. That's right, I saw them. Yeah. Yes. We're going to, as we walk along, by the way, you'll come up, we'll go past some cages. We'll talk about those cages afterwards. They're basically deer exclosures. We excluded the deer from trying to chew what's in those cages and see what kind of regeneration we have. So, and not very much has happened, so we're just going to pass. Kind of failed. So, how did this rock get here?
Tractor. Or
4 or 5 very large guys put this rock here. That is the actual truth to the story, but the story that we tell, at least the school groups, in the big picture, how did this rock get here? It got here, what scientists tell us, through an ice age. This is what's called a glacial erratic. And the glaciers that Michigan went through between 4 and 5 different periods of ice and glaciers. And what we like to say is that, and the soil scientists I've talked to talk about how much ice that was here, and they say that at one point there would have been at least a mile of ice above us. And so if you can put that into relative terms, this maple tree is about 100 feet tall. So if you put 2 of those together, you've got 200 feet, 3 of them, 300 feet, etc., etc. There's 5,280 feet in a mile. So, how many trees would you need to stack of these to have a mile of ice? That's a lot of ice. Even just 200 feet worth of tree is enough. But imagine that being ice covering that. Very heavy. Very, very heavy, as you can imagine. And any rocks or anything that came in its path got moved or sucked into that, enveloped in ice, and transported. This is granite. We don't have granite in southern Michigan around this area. They have it up in the UP. They have it up in Canada. Well, that got here. It got enveloped into that glacier, and as things warmed and melted, things tumbled out, and this is what's left. If you can see, actually, there's some lines, very thin lines, and that was what's that was face down in this glacier for a certain period, being pushed along the ground and smoothing it. The other side is not smooth. We didn't smooth this. This was natural. This little design on here is limestone. So that limestone almost adhered to the rock as it got pushed along the ground, encased in snow and ice. So, that is how this rock got here. I am by far not a geologist, and it's very confusing to me with igneous and metamorphic and all the other kinds of rocks there are. But kids always ask me, what kind of rock is this? And the best answer I have for them, for example, this right here. Do you know what kind of rock this is? Hold it. This is called leverite. Leave it right there.
You can leave it.
All right, let's go. I'm going to talk briefly about how to identify trees, and then you guys are welcome to go into the chapel yourself. If you'd like to check that out. What's that?
What's a chapel?
Building, small church, chapel. As I was telling this young couple that we had 3 weddings here yesterday.
Oh, wow.
So 3 different brides and grooms. If you ever decide to get married here, you get a free ride in a golf cart from the parking lot up here. It's special. It's a white golf cart. There's nothing special about it, but you get a free ride in the golf cart. And it's electric, so it doesn't make a sound. It's not like you're like running through the forest. When I talk about tree identification to kids, it's always a challenge, because if I say, hey, let's do some tree identification, kids are like, ew, that just doesn't sound like fun. So I came up with the term becoming a tree detective, because it sounds a little more intriguing, a little more interesting, and being a detective is much more fun than being an identifier of something. And what we do when we look to identify trees, we look for 3 different characteristics. What are those characteristics? How can we tell different trees apart? What do we look at?
Bark.
Bark is one. Leaves. And?
Branches.
What is that?
Branches.
You can use branches, but there's a more simple way than that. That's for kind of an accelerated, like, oh, it's opposite or alternate branching, but for just the basic knowledge. You look for, what do all trees start out as?
Seeds.
Seeds. So, if you have an apple tree,
It starts as an apple.
the seeds are in that fruit. You don't see the exposed seed, like an acorn. If you see an acorn, you know you've got an oak tree nearby. Don't know what kind, then you look at the leaves and the bark that helps you identify. So when we look at the 2 major pine species that we have here at Hartwick Pines, we have the white pine, which is kind of brownish gray. It's got deep ridges, and you can't pull that bark off. And then behind us over here is a red pine. What color is that bark?
Red.
Yay, it's very simple. So, but that bark also does peel off a lot easier. When red pines are small, it's not as platy or flaky because it's smaller. And white pines are gray and smooth when they're young, so that's misleading. So there's a lot of characteristics you have to look at. You look at the needles, and the reason I say becoming a tree detective is because if I was to say, let's go find some needles on these trees, we have to get a volunteer to go up and grab some of those needles, and that's like nearly impossible. Later. I'll come back and throw you up there and see you do. So we look for clues on the ground, because detectives look for clues. So if you find a bundle of needles on the ground, we can take a bundle of needles off. And tree needles come in bundles. If anybody here celebrates Christmas and you bring a tree into your house, or you have a fake one, fake ones are looking more and more like real trees every year. They're phenomenal. But some of those are fir trees, and they're individual needles along the branch. But any pine tree will have a bundle, and they're connected at the end, like this.
I get those all the time.
You get these all the time, and so somebody knows, maybe it has a tree, something like this. In Waco, you may have a different kind of pine, but they'll still be bundled. And if we count how many needles there are in a bundle, how many needles are there, young lady? Oops.
5.
5, yes. And you can spell the word white, W-H-I-T-E, white pine. You can also spell Craig. Does it really help you? But you can spell Craig. What I find from kids is that they are very literal. I get kids, and it's evident with you guys, obviously, right? But kids will come in, and as soon as I say there's 5, somebody will pick it up, and they'll find one, and they'll go, Mr. Craig, this one's got 4. And I go, you know what that means? They're like, what? I'm like, 1 fell off. And then some will go and find a 3. Now, what does that mean? I'm like, do the math. 2 fell off. Anything with 5 or less needles that are short and stout like this, not long, because the red pine needles are a lot longer, and there's only 2 per bundle. If you have any on the ground, I'd show you, but those don't come off as frequently. Here's a red pine. This is old bundle that came down, but they've got 2 needles per bundle, and generally a little bit longer. These are nipped at the end, so they'd be about 3 inches, 4 inches long. Red pine, white pine. As for the seeds, we would look forever. Very good, fine. We would look forever for the seeds of the white pine or red pine, because the seeds are very, very tiny. So instead we look for the capsule that contains the seeds, which would be the Cones. And underneath these scales are little seeds that are eaten by squirrels and birds. And so they're a reason for birds and animals to live in forests with cones. I think I have, maybe.
We did that.
I had some red pine. Red pine cones are not as prevalent,
What grade are you
but they are short and stout.
going for?
Now, another kind of cone that we will frequently see
This is a seed.
here on the ground is this cone. This is not a baby cone. This is a cone that came from that tree over there, which is a hemlock. And the needle, you can see the cones on the branches up there. They're little tiny. This is not a pine cone. If you learn one thing this afternoon from me talking to you, not all cones are pine cones. The reason this is a pine cone is because it came from a pine tree. This is not a pine cone because it came from a hemlock tree, which makes it a hemlock cone. What kind of cones do spruce trees produce? Spruce cone. Very good. You win. So if you looked at a forest and you saw a bunch of cones, if you said, look at all the pine cones, you might be right. But if you said, look at all the cones, you will always be right. Because they're not always pine cones. Sometimes they're spruce cones, sometimes they're fir cones. And if you ever get a Christmas tree that is mature enough that has cones, those cones, instead of hanging down like this from a branch, grow up on the tree. So that's how you can always identify a fir tree on a Christmas tree lot. If you got a cone and it's growing up from the branch, you grow up at the top. It's kind of a very attractive, very sappy though, so sticky. So get those. Make sure you don't let those get on your carpet in the house. It smells good.
My cousin.
Right, we got one more stop. Going down the hill. Let's walk so we don't skin our knees and faces. Feel free to go into the chapel if you want to take a look. Good eye. So what kind of pines do you have in Texas? Acorns. Plastic.
Yeah.
Got some of like the lodgepole out there, ponderosa. Any of those? Mugo, pinyon.
Mugo.
I'm originally from South Texas.
Oh.
Laredo.
All right.
We lived in 15 years. I don't remember a whole bunch of times.
Yeah.
We were in Scrub Oaks.
Sure.
Waco.
Sure. Right.
You know, but you got, if you go towards Houston now, David Crocker National Forest there.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, that's a lot of nice pines. But right there in Waco, I don't remember too much. I mean, there's got to be.
Yeah. But not in terms of forest. Forest. One or two. Pine. Yeah. She found a red pine. So this is a red pine cone. Underneath these scales would be the seeds, and by the time they get dried like this, here's.
Can I come? A seed?
Yep. This is the wing of the seed. The seed itself is not developed on this, but keep in mind it'd just be a little ball at the end of it. So when I say you gotta find these seeds,
We have to go to that one.
you usually do that. It falls on me. And the kids keep looking for it. They're like, where'd it go? Well, it disappears. You just look for the cone. Don't look for the seed. So at our last stop here, what we see is what we think the old growth forest used to look like 500 years ago. And what happened when the forest was growing, that old growth forest was growing, we had some large white pines, and we had young maples and young beech trees and birch trees that were growing here. And a fire came through and wiped out all of this little stuff. These little maples cannot withstand a fire. The bark is not thick enough to save them from being damaged. White pine, when it gets older, starts to get thicker and thicker bark, and it is immune to major fire. If it goes to the crown, it's goner. But if it burns down the understory, then it would survive. So the white pines and red pines survive those fires because they drop their branches and they self-prune themselves. So imagine this is what it looked like 500 years ago. Everything gets burned out except for some white pines and red pines that are large enough. They drop the seed, new white pines and red pines grow. 100 years later, another forest fire comes through. Those white pines and red pines survived, but the hardwood trees are young again. and those got burned out. So then 75 years later, more white pines and red pines start growing and get bigger and thicker bark and become immune to fire. But these young hardwood trees can't withstand that, and they keep dying out. So that old-growth forest is there in a way by an accident, because it should be a mixed hardwood pine forest. But because of the massive fires that came through the area before European settling, it's an anomaly in a way, because it should be a mixed forest, but the pines survived and the hardwoods didn't. We see that this forest is excellent habitat for different kinds of wildlife, primarily because of all the regeneration on the forest floor. If you've got places where small little critters can hide, then you've got the potential to have bigger animals that like to eat those smaller animals. And so that's the animal that I'll show you now, the biggest one I have in my bag.
You can get one of these at the gift shop. The fox. Is the gift shop? Oh, where?
What is that?
A wolf?
No.
Fox?
Bobcat.
Very good, young lady. Yes, this is a bobcat. Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the bobcat you see in the wild will not have a yellow tag sticking out of its eye socket. So yeah, that's not normal. It wasn't born that way. It was after it was trapped, and this is to show that it was actually tagged or taken legally instead of through poaching. But a bobcat, which stands about this tall, hides and uses camouflage quite effectively in a forest. So a bobcat will sit in a forest and wait for unsuspecting little mice to come by and then jump out and startle them and eat them. That is the best way that a cat knows how to utilize its abilities, by using stealth. Yes.
Is a bobcat just like a cat?
Feel it.
Yes.
Just like a cat. It's in the cat family, right? You got a cat. What's your cat's name?
Hunter.
Okay, so let's say you're getting a drink of water in the kitchen, and Hunter comes in right behind you. Do you hear Hunter? I mean, do you hear?
Very quiet.
Yeah. No, and cats are. Even if you didn't remove the claws from Hunter's paws, you still would not hear those claws on the ground.
She's
because
not their cat.
she's what?
Another.
Oh, door cat, right. But so she's got her claws? Mm-hmm. But do you see those claws all the time? No,
Yeah.
they retract them, don't they?
She always has them inside.
Yep, and that's why they're always sharp. So you can actually take her pad and push down, and those claws will come out a little bit. The claws on this cat are still in there too, and they're very sharp. So when I pass this around, be careful of those claws. They're very sharp. Cats bring their claws out to attack, defend, or climb, or scratch, not because they're trying to gain some traction on the ground. Dogs, on the other hand, claws are always out. Who here owns a dog?
I own 3.
What's your dog's name? Roscoe. That's a good name for a dog. So you're getting a drink of water at your kitchen sink, and Roscoe comes in behind you. What do you hear? You hear it click, 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 click. Yep. Because dogs keep their claws out all the time. Teak and Marley, my dogs, we like to have them walk on the cement in their subdivision because it wears down their claws, and we don't have to take them to the groomer and pay money to get their nails trimmed. So dogs use strength and speed to get their prey. Cats use stealth and speed to get their prey. So different methods of hunting. Although fox, on the other hand, use that stealth as well. Red fox in a field will perk up their ears and listen for movement, and then hop down on top and pounce on that mouse and then eat them out. So when you want to pass that around, you can. Those are mites. Little eggs that the mites. Mites are small little arachnids. They're like spiders from the spider family. These little hairs are things that you see on a maple. They come in different varieties. We had them in sequestors when I was growing up.
Those are pointed. Do you mean this big for big pencil?
That's red pine. Very good. So these are mites.
Ours.
And I can't really spell it. It's a Euryphidium mite or something like that. Starts with an EU. Euryphidium mite. And they're just mites that eventually are. This is their stage of development. They'll pop out of there, and then little mites will go around and do whatever mites do. So they're not dangerous to a tree. They don't kill a tree. It just looks unsightly. A lot of people, from a neighborhood standpoint, will see a tree and go, "Oh, my tree died." It just looks weird.
You're not
It's really not bad. You can get rid of it by taking a pesticide and spraying it out of there, but then you're dealing with adding a chemical that's not natural. You can also take the leaves off, and I can dispose of all these so that I'm reducing the population of the mites.
Look at it.
But then that's labor intensive in a forest. That
Looks like a human
doesn't
snow.
make a difference. I'd be here all day just trying to remove mites.
Now this is
All right, we'll go down to the log museum.
actually kind of looks like
Logging museum. The funnily dressed guy over there. The one on the right. The other guy that's kind of funny too, but I don't know him, so I don't want to get in trouble. No, and then also Heidi's down here too, and they're two of our costumed interpreters. So we'd be happy to answer any questions about the logging and White Pine logging era. There are restrooms down at the end of this trail. On your right, there's vault toilets. So if you have to go to the bathroom, you can go to the bathroom now. Otherwise, the visitor center's back up this way, so if you want to go that way, that's the way I'm going now. But if everyone wants to follow me or stay around here, they'd be happy to help you out with that stuff.
Let's look around.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks for visiting.
Thank you.
Thank you.